At a gas station, a man witnessed a horrifying scene. A vicious dog was slowly approaching his daughter. Terrified, the girl backed away repeatedly, unaware she had no more room to retreat. Helplessly, she called out to her father for help. Ray tried to calm his daughter while clapping loudly to scare the dog away, but the dog ignored him completely and became even more aggressive, moving closer to the girl. Seeing his daughter about to fall, Ray quickly warned her not to move. He then picked up a rock from the ground and threw it fiercely at the dog. When Ray regained consciousness, he faintly saw his wife holding their daughter, sobbing uncontrollably. He couldn't accept the fact that his beloved daughter might have died. Noticing Ray standing blankly aside, his wife repeatedly slapped his face, trying to bring him back to his senses. With his mind blank, Ray suddenly pushed his wife away. When he finally came to his senses, he realized his daughter was not dead. She seemed to have only fractured her arm. He immediately carried his daughter to the car. To get her quickly to a nearby hospital, Ray sped all the way, unaware his nightmare was just beginning. Seeing the overcrowded hospital, Ray could only wait quietly in line. But his anxious wife kept urging him to think of something quickly. Having no choice, Ray went to the reception desk to ask about the situation. But the nurse's strange look made him feel uneasy. He carefully filled out the registration form, then returned to his seat to continue the long wait. However, while waiting, Ray inadvertently saw something strange. The emergency responders were handing a box marked with human organs to hospital staff while admitting patients. Yet this unusual act didn't immediately arouse Ray's suspicion. Just then, it was finally their daughter's turn. But the nurse told Ray that because they weren't local residents, they couldn't benefit from the local medical insurance policy. Instead, they had to establish a medical record for the girl first, followed by numerous unrelated questions. This made the already anxious Ray and his wife feel baffled, but what the nurse said next immediately sent chills down their spines.
Would you like Perry listed for organ donation?
No.
Can I convince you to reconsider the number of children in the transplant list?
Not now, please.
Seeing the couple's determined expressions, the nurse could only explain it was standard hospital procedure. At this point, Ray was only concerned with his daughter's safety. He anxiously urged the nurse to hurry and treat his daughter, but the nurse said the hospital couldn't accept insurance cards from non-local residents. To get his injured daughter treated quickly, Ray offered to pay out of pocket. However, the nurse said she needed to seek approval from her supervisor first and quickly left. Ray had never encountered such a bizarre hospital before. Not only was the treatment procedure strange, but even the nurse's attitude was extremely odd. Yet, with his daughter in danger, Ray and his family had no other choice. This inadvertently trapped them in a terrifying conspiracy. Soon the nurse returned, informing them the hospital had agreed to their request for self-payment. She then arranged another nurse to take them to the examination room. Finally, they met the attending doctor. After a thorough examination, the doctor concluded that the girl had only a fractured arm and no other injuries. However, during the detailed checkup, the doctor repeatedly praised the girl's beautiful eyes. Yet even this unusual behavior didn't arouse suspicion in the couple. Then the doctor suggested, just to be safe, doing a full-body CT scan to check for possible internal organ damage. He added that this test was costly and advised them to consider it carefully before deciding. Without hesitation, Ray immediately agreed, believing no price was too high for his daughter's safety. Another doctor then gave the girl a bunny doll and took her toward the elevator. However, the doctor stopped Ray and his wife from following. He explained that the basement examination area was a restricted medical area, allowing only one family member to accompany the patient. Ray chose to wait upstairs, letting his wife go with their daughter. But the horrors were just beginning. After several hours of waiting, Ray still hadn't seen his wife and daughter return. An uneasy feeling started to creep over him. He hurried to the nurse's station to ask how much longer the examination would take. But after checking, the nurse shockingly informed him there was no record of his daughter's hospital admission in their system. Ray was confused. He had clearly seen his wife and daughter enter the examination room. How could there be no record at all? Then the nurse asked if maybe the registration was under the father's name, causing the confusion. Ray quickly explained that since his insurance card wasn't accepted, he had opted to pay out of pocket. But the nurse replied she'd never heard of such a hospital policy. Hearing the nurse's indifferent explanation, Ray's anger finally ignited. He insisted he could prove everything he said, just ask the morning shift doctors and nurses, and the truth would be clear. However, the nurse informed Ray that the morning shift had already left work and gone home. Faced with Ray's firm attitude, the nurse reluctantly called the examination department to confirm. Yet the final response was that no such person existed, and no tests had been conducted since 9 a.m. This meant the hospital indeed never admitted his daughter. Ray couldn't accept that he'd somehow lost his wife and daughter at the hospital. He immediately rushed into the ward, frantically searching everywhere for his wife and daughter. Just then, a security guard rushed over and quickly restrained Ray. The commotion soon attracted the attention of the doctor on duty. Under questioning by the attending doctor, Ray once again recounted the entire incident. The doctor began carefully checking all the hospital admission records for the day. Yet there was still no record of Ray's daughter. The whole situation became increasingly bizarre. Just then, a hospital attendant nearby caught Ray's attention. Ray immediately pointed out that this attendant could prove their entire family had been here. The attendant readily confirmed Ray's story, but said he had only treated Ray's head injury and hadn't seen any other family members accompanying him.
What have you done to my family? Leave me! Calm down! Where did you take my family? Calm down!
To calm Ray down, the doctor was forced to give him a sedative injection. They then dragged him into a room to stabilize his raging emotions. But just as the staff left, Ray discovered adrenaline in a cabinet. To quickly regain consciousness, he injected himself several times. Having recovered, Ray resumed searching the hospital for his wife and daughter. Suddenly, a familiar face caught his eye again. It was the man who had escorted his daughter to the examination room. Unfortunately, hospital security spotted Ray again. Ray quickly rushed outside the hospital and hid in his car to avoid detection by security guards. Seeing his wife's cell phone on the seat, Ray was certain his wife and daughter had been at the hospital. But how could two living people disappear into thin air? Just as Ray was at a loss, he saw a police car parked nearby. He rushed toward the police car immediately, seeking help from the police. He took out photos of his wife and daughter and explained his experience in detail. The police also felt Ray's strange encounter was unbelievable. They decided to follow Ray back to the hospital to investigate the truth again. However, the doctor's explanation now took a subtle turn. He claimed that he wasn't the person who had attended them at the time. He suggested the lack of admission records might have been due to delays in updating the files, but there would surely be records in the third-floor examination room. Upon hearing the doctor's explanation, Ray lost his patience completely.
You're full of shit. The CAT scans are downstairs.
No, our imaging lab's on the third floor.
No, I saw him get in an elevator and go down.
He's obviously confused. Our lab is on 3.
Can you take us up there, please?
He immediately refuted the doctor's statement. With no choice, the doctor took everyone to the third floor to find the truth. But after checking the usage records of the equipment, they discovered the machines hadn't been used at all since 9 a.m. This meant Ray's wife and daughter had never come here at the indicated time. Yet Ray didn't believe the doctor's words, firmly convinced the hospital had hidden his wife and daughter. At this point, the police officer wasn't sure who was lying. Only by calling in the attending physician from earlier in the morning could they clarify the truth. Seeing the attending physician, Ray immediately stepped forward and asked if he recognized him. Without hesitation, the doctor confirmed Ray's statement. Thrilled someone finally verified his story, Ray felt relieved. However, what the doctor said next plunged him into despair again. The doctor stated that around 9 a.m., Ray had arrived at the hospital alone, claiming he'd been in a car accident. Noticing Ray's extremely unstable emotional state, the doctor suggested a brain CT to see if Ray had sustained some form of injury. However, Ray immediately refused the doctor's advice, insisting on waiting in the lobby for his wife, Abby, to come out. The police officer next to them was baffled. Ray's wife was clearly named Joanne, so why was Ray suddenly calling her Abby? Only then did Ray explain that Abby was his first wife. He claimed the hospital must have accessed his information when checking his medical insurance card. Thus, they deliberately used his ex-wife's name to frame him. This way, no one would believe anything he said, and the doctor's crime of kidnapping patients could remain concealed. Just then, a security guard suggested that reviewing surveillance footage from that morning would reveal who was lying. However, after careful inspection, the surveillance footage showed no trace of Ray's wife and daughter. Seeing this evidence, even the police began questioning Ray's mental state. To confirm the truth of his own claims, the attending physician suggested visiting the ward to find more witnesses. Back in the ward, Ray inadvertently discovered a scarf under a hospital bed. It belonged to his daughter, proving she had indeed been in the hospital. However, when the police took the scarf for examination, they discovered traces of blood on it. Ray touched his forehead, saying it was probably accidentally smeared from his own wound. But this point happened to imply that Ray might have brought the scarf himself. At the same time, the doctor mentioned that memory confusion can occur after a head injury. Thus, a psychologist was brought in to evaluate Ray. Coincidentally, this woman became the key figure to uncovering the truth. After a detailed conversation with Ray, she shared her conclusions with the attending physician.
They might still be out there.
The police then brought Ray back to the gas station. After a careful search, they found a pool of blood beneath the snow. Nearby, they also discovered the small mirror his daughter carried. Looking at the bloodstain, Ray claimed it came from his forehead injury. However, such a small wound couldn't have produced so much blood, indicating the bloodstain belonged to Ray's daughter. It turned out the psychologist had already reached her conclusion. Ray must have killed his daughter, then fabricated the story of the dog attack to conceal his crime. He further invented the conspiracy involving doctors at the hospital harming his daughter. Hearing this detailed account from the psychologist, Ray fell silent. He began to accept her version of events, feeling immense regret in his heart. Just as the police were about to arrest Ray, the vicious dog reappeared before his eyes. Ray vividly recalled the attack scene again, convinced everything he believed was true. Seizing an opportunity, he grabbed a policeman's gun, took the psychologist hostage, and forced everyone to drop their weapons. Then, he locked them all inside a nearby room. At this moment, the psychologist warned Ray that even seeing something personally doesn't always make it true. If he continued down this path, he would make an irreversible mistake. But Ray refused to listen, determined only to rescue his wife and daughter trapped in the hospital. Ray drove back to the hospital alone, disguised himself as a doctor, and entered the mysterious elevator. To his surprise, accessing the basement required a special key. Suddenly, the elevator doors opened and the security guard appeared in front of him. Ray quickly pulled the guard inside, drew his gun, and forced him to hand over the elevator key. Just as the guard prepared to surrender the key, he suddenly threw it to the ground, lunging forward to knock the gun from Ray's hand. A fierce struggle ensued between the two men. Soon, Ray strangled the guard until he lost consciousness. Picking up the key, Ray opened the elevator and was stunned by the scene in front of him, a secret underground area beneath the hospital. He then discovered the bunny doll the doctor had given his daughter discarded in a trash can, confirming she must be there. Just then, sudden noises forced Ray to hide. He saw two doctors pushing a cart out of the operating room, carrying two boxes marked with human organs. A sudden terror filled his heart, prompting him to rush into the operating room. He panicked upon seeing two bodies on the surgical tables. Gathering his courage, Ray approached and pulled back the sheet, revealing a corpse whose organs had been completely removed. He immediately recalled the incident from earlier that morning. Pulling back another sheet, he found a body missing both eyes, which instantly reminded him of the doctor, praising his daughter's beautiful eyes. As he continued searching, he finally saw his own daughter lying in another operating room. Ray rushed into the room, gun drawn, forcing everyone to drop their surgical instruments. Approaching the table, Ray touched his daughter and felt warmth, relieved she was still alive. He then ordered all the doctors to remove their masks, eager to see the true faces of these monstrous people. To Ray's shock, they turned out to be the same doctors and nurses he had met earlier that day. Shortly after, he found his unconscious wife nearby. As Ray prepared to leave with his wife and daughter, a doctor suddenly lunged at him, attempting to inject him with a sedative. Ray quickly pushed his wife and daughter away, shooting at the doctors blocking their path. They quickly got into their car and escaped from the horrifying hospital. However, the story wasn't nearly that simple. At this moment came the film's greatest twist. Suddenly, the wife and daughter sitting in the back seat transformed into a boy. Only now was the entire truth truly revealed.